We'll just ask all of the folks who are on the meeting to introduce themselves, maybe first, because it looks like we have a lot of people here this time. And just as you're talking, if you'd introduce yourself each time, we would appreciate that. So I'll turn it over to Sarah, who I think might turn it over to someone else.
Yes, thank you, Commissioner Kelly. I'll turn this over to Jan Schubert-Eric, who I believe is going to lead us through the presentation. Just as a reminder for folks watching the meeting, this is a work session of the Board of County Commissioners, so it is for information purposes only, and no decisions will be made today. Jan?
Yes, I'm testing my video. Can you hear me? Can you turn my video on, my audio on?
We can hear you, Jan.
Oh, you can, okay. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank the commissioners and the administrative staff for the opportunity to hold the work session today. There are a number of people at the table this afternoon that I would like to introduce. Members of the Heritage Conservation Council that will speak today. They're attending via the Zoom meeting with their microphones open. They are Mike Delaney, our Vice Chair, Kathy Dwiggins, Past Chair, Amy Van Der Riet, Kim Bellamere, and perhaps Jack Hoffman. I'm not sure if he's making it or not. Also at the table is Jasmine Moore, the Director of Sustainability for Lawrence and Douglas County. Jill Joliker, is the Assistant County Administrator, is assisting with the PowerPoint presentation. And I am Jan Schubert-Eric, the Heritage Conservation Council Program Coordinator. You take us to slide 2. We come today with a celebratory spirit as we reflect on the accomplishments of the HCC over the last 10 years. We also come today with a humble spirit, knowing that the current situation with COVID-19 will impact Douglas County in many unknown ways. We come knowing that the work that has been accomplished through this program has benefited all areas of the county, and that this program will help sustain the work of our nonprofit heritage organizations, as well as our natural resources organizations. Their work is important to the future of Douglas County. This session will touch on the creation of the HCC and its purpose. We'll highlight programs that are one of a kind in Kansas and beyond. We'll update you on the current initiatives, and we'll seek your input, commissioners, for the role of the HCC as we move forward. Third slide. In 2010, a task force was formed, and through a public process that involved residents across the county, key concerns emerged. The task force worked to create recommendations to the commission that would meet the commission's goals to conserve natural and cultural heritage and enhance economic benefits through tourism, local agriculture, and other conservation efforts. Slide 4. In June 2011, Douglas County Resolution number 11-19 laid out the purpose of the HCC, establishing the annual Natural and Cultural Grant Program and the Natural and Cultural Heritage Resources Survey work as 2 main programs. The county also instructed the HCC to pursue the certified local government status for the county. They left operational procedures up to the council and noted that there may be other tasks assigned in the future. In 2013, the HCC achieved the CLG status for the county, making the county eligible for federal grant dollars available through the Kansas Historic Preservation Office. Slide 5, and Kathy will speak now, Kathy Dwiggins.
Yes, the composition of the Heritage Conservation Council is 7 members who are Douglas County residents and who demonstrate an interest in historic preservation and conservation of the county's natural and cultural heritage. I think it's important to to note several of the points regarding the composition, that efforts should be made to balance the representation of all communities and of unincorporated areas in the county, and to note also that all members are appointed and approved by the Douglas County Commission. Some elements of the composition are determined by our interest in current status as a certified local government. These are requirements of certified local government, that there be a combination of preservation-related professionals and of professionals and lay people with interests in closely related areas to preservation. And the benefit of having 3 preservation-related professionals is that it brings professional knowledge, skills, and experience to the work of the HCC and guides the HCC projects, as well as connecting the HCC to the professional networks of the professional members. The inclusion of other professionals and lay people with interests in related disciplines adds different perspectives, experience, and community connections. Again, our purpose is to work with members of the community throughout the county, and to do our work in a way that meets the standards of the historic preservation professions. It's also important to recognize the level of expertise that members bring to the HCC, plus the monetary value of their contributions. Members contribute many hours of work on behalf of the county beyond those necessary to implement the grant program. And the CLG status also requires members to participate in professional meetings and other things to stay current with the field. So I think that the value of this kind of group to the county is great. Next slide, please. One responsibility of the HCC is to conduct an ongoing inventory of the natural and cultural resources of the county. And these include, but aren't limited to, historically and architecturally significant properties and lands, structures, and areas that exemplify the cultural, social, economic, political, agriculture, environmental, or architectural history of the area. So this is a broad view, and we've been in existence for 10 years. I believe we've made significant progress toward these goals, but note that it says ongoing, and we have identified projects for the future. We have conducted or hired professionals to conduct surveys of historic buildings during the past 8 years. And through these surveys, we have both general knowledge and more specific knowledge of 8 townships. We have the 9th on the list for this coming year. The information from the surveys tells what buildings, and also for buildings who are possibly eligible for the National Register, they're identified. This helps us understand the range of resources that are available. The information from the surveys is entered into the Kansas Historic Resources Inventory, KHRI, at the State Historic Preservation Office. And this information is available on the Kansas Historical Society website. It's available to anyone who wants to look, and it's sortable if you have particular interests. Douglas County was the first county in the state to begin this process and nearly complete the process of the surveys. And this is recognized as an exemplary program. The surveys are the basis for HCC projects in the future, including the local historic register. And they also are a resource for county and state staff, and as I said, others in the community. A significant impact of the survey program is the interactions with county residents that are a part of the survey. Each survey, and again, we have completed 16 of those. For each survey, there's a public meeting at the beginning to inform everyone about what will happen, and one at the end to learn some of the results. So that is a time when communities in townships can come together, and as the surveyors go out through the community, they have opportunities for individual contacts with property owners. This means there are also opportunities to follow up if individuals have questions, follow up with staff, and it also builds a community awareness of the historic resources. So we have seen by doing this that there are significant benefits to our charge of surveying the resources. Next slide, please. On this slide, it identifies the members of the Heritage Conservation Council and Jan as a staff member. The HCC was formed, as Jan mentioned, after a task force worked in 2010. They held 6 community discussions throughout the county. And these listening sessions are similar to those many people may have participated in as a part of the long-range planning process for 2040 and some of the other projects that have happened in the county. The task force made their recommendations based on these discussions to the commission in 2011, and the HCC was established. Some of the first HCC members served for 6 years developing the HCC operations and implementing the grant and survey programs. I want to mention some of the people who were involved in this with great dedication in this effort. Ken Grotewheel was the co-chair of the task force. Julia Manglitz, historic preservation architect, and Shelley Hickman Clark, attorney, who all contributed to the to all the materials that guide the HCC today. And HCC members, as you can see from their activities, from their titles, bring significant skills and experience to the current work of the HCC and to projects in development, as the list demonstrates. And recognizing that perhaps everyone cannot read the list, is it helpful if I read that? I will say Michael Delaney, Jan already identified, and Amy Vanderreed, who are part of this presentation. Kim Mahana Bellamere and Lindsay Crick, Jack Hoffman, and Jenny Trucano Muller are also members of the HCC currently. Next slide, please.
Okay, this is Jan.
Yes.
This has been a time of reflection for the Heritage Conservation Council as we pause to remember that we have 9 years of the grant program behind us, and this will be our 10th anniversary year for grant awards. To date, 66 projects have been funded from all across the county. The program has impacted Baldwin City, Baker University, Blackjack Battlefield and Nature Park, and the Midland Railroad, to name a few. In nearby areas of Vinland and Clearfield, funds have provided support for local preservationists to save Clearfield School and the story of German immigration. In Eudora, the program has supported the restoration of structures along Main Street that now serve as the Eudora Community Building, which in turn has sparked increased interest in preserving other historic buildings for businesses along Main Street. In Lecompton, funding has supported the Territorial Capitol Museum, Constitution Hall, the repair of the community building, and more. These are just a few of the examples of the program's impact on communities across the county. Equally important, though, is the support that the program has had on conservation projects relating to native prairies, Baldwin Woods, and an easement that made Lawrence Nature Park in Lawrence a reality. Additional environmental projects include a local native plant guide, bank restoration along the Caw, and a water festival for students at Clinton Park. These are just a few, but basically, if you just take a look around you at recent projects in the county, many were supported by this program in part. Next slide. Nonprofit heritage organizations across the county collect, preserve, and share the history of Douglas County on a daily basis. These sites have been significantly impacted by the HCC's programs, and these sites in turn support their communities by providing jobs, attracting tourists, and contributing to the quality of life for local residents and visitors alike. They include the Eudora Area Historical Society, Lecompton Historical Society, the Watkins Museum of History in Lawrence, Blackjack Battlefield and Nature Park, the Santa Fe Trail Historical Society of Douglas County, the Clinton Lake Historical Society, and Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area. Next slide. In addition, the HCC has developed a strong collaborative relationship with the Kansas State Historic Preservation Office. Each year, the HCC applies for Heritage Preservation Fund grants from SHPO. These grants support the historic building intensive surveys, preservation workshops, tax credit seminars, and training opportunities for the program coordinator and the HCC members. Over $100,000 in HPF grant dollars have been awarded to the county in support of the consul's work since 2013. In addition to grant dollars, SHPO staff members serve as advisors to a wide range of projects across the county. From building projects, assistance with locals and state national register listings, SHPO staff members support preservation efforts. And I would emphasize that Douglas County receives more than its share of SHPO's time in support of projects around the county. Next slide. This chart just shows the HPF funds that we've received since we had been designated a certified local government in 2013. The HCC's work has created a strong program that is now used as a model by SHPO. Next slide. Or as we say, this is the pretty building slide. But every building in rural, unincorporated areas of the county has a story to tell about the people who have settled here, the lives they have led, and the communities that they have built. This legacy has been captured in part by the survey process. Data collected include historic images, family stories, farmland design, and materials. This information has all been uploaded into the Kansas Historic Resource Inventory, where it is available to the public, but also to planning and zoning, to public works, to KDOT and others, and also to researchers. The county has over 7,000 entries in the database, which surpasses any other county in the state of Kansas. Kathy Dwiggins.
Next slide, please. So what we've learned through the historic building survey process, I think the first thing we've learned is that the resources, the historic and cultural natural resources of Douglas County that exist today reflect their value, the value that the citizens have placed on them. Every piece of land that got saved because people cared all along the way. So I think that that's fundamental to the process. And local people are preserving places across the county. They're not doing it necessarily because they want recognition or a National Register listing, but they're protecting and preserving our historic and cultural assets. And they do take pride in their efforts. Most historic places are in need of preservation assistance of some sort, whether that's expert advice or assistance with the financial cost of preservation. There are state programs that provide some assistance, and one that is also unusual among other states is the Kansas Tax Credit Program, which offers 25% tax credit on national register properties, work on them that is approved by the State Historic Preservation Office. And there are many properties, and not very many have taken advantage of this tax credit program to date. So that's something that we're working to encourage. Most resources are privately owned. Many are owned by local nonprofits, and some receive annual county allocations to help support their preservation. Some do not, but all of them are valuable to the county. And the public has expressed increasing support for the work of the HCC and demonstrated this through public meeting attendance and cooperation. And we learned this through the public meetings as a part of the survey. We've every meeting had attendees from the area. And the last meeting we had, which was about the Marion Township survey, there were 50 people in attendance, all interested in hearing about the results, and many had been active participants in the process of the survey. So the survey is important as building awareness and also opportunities for collaboration, formal or informally organized. Amy?
Yes, this is Amy. Moving forward, as we complete these surveys, an incredibly comprehensive planning process can begin, building on the foundation of the diligent field survey work. New mapping technologies will pull together data providing clear direction in our course to conserve both the natural, archaeological, and built environment. This is an exciting and new approach to preservation that will become an example for many other counties. And you can move to the next slide. And I believe, Jan, you come back.
This is Mike Delaney's slide, I believe.
Yeah, this is Mike Delaney. I'm going to spend a minute or two on this slide, and then maybe we'll come back to it in a while. But I know the information that's arrayed on the slide is a little hard to see, but the red dots on the map are the location of over 200 barns that are now listed in the KHRI database as eligible for listing on the National Register. And those that are reflected on the map are ones that have been surveyed in the survey work that's been completed to date. You'll notice that there aren't many around Clinton Lake. That's because that township has a survey remaining to be completed, but most of the other townships have had their surveys complete. Part of the preliminary discussion here has been to talk about what the HCC has done up to this point, and the principal focuses of the HCC to date have been the administration of the HCC grant program and the oversight and supervision of the survey process. But we're right at the very end of the survey process. We've received funds from the state for its 60% match to complete the survey in Marion Township, and we have a grant pending with SHPO to do both a reconnaissance and the intensive survey in Clinton Township. And when that's complete at the end of next year, all of the survey of historic buildings in the county, at least the first effort at that, will have been completed. And so we've been thinking for a while about what comes next now that this essential preliminary survey work has been done, and the HCC has been doing some planning on its own in this regard. One of the one of the objectives of doing the survey work, obviously, is to identify historic properties and to provide opportunities to try to preserve those that can be preserved, to encourage the preservation of those. And this barn slide, it gives an indication of why that's important. If you notice on the right-hand side of the slide, on the eastern part of the county, you'll notice relatively fewer historic barns. There were historic barns in those areas until the last 20 or 30 or 40 years, but a lot of them have disappeared as a result of development and whatnot. You'll notice in the more rural, less developed areas of the county, in the southwest portion of the map, there are a heavier cluster of these barns. And so one of the things that the survey work has enabled us to do is to take a look at where these historic properties are and to help to begin to target efforts to ensure that they're preserved. And each one of these barns represents, as Jan mentioned earlier, a piece of the story about how the county came to be settled and the families that moved here, and sort of the change in the way the county has developed over the past 150 years. Let's move to the next slide, please. This is another one of the interesting or pretty building slides, but each of these are barns that have been identified among the several hundred that are eligible for listing on the register. And we've been discussing among ourselves how to assist property owners. As Kathy mentioned earlier, the folks that own these barns are proud of them in many cases and are interested in doing what they can to preserve them. So one result, if you'll move to the next slide. One result of that planning and the discussions at the HCC level has been the development of a collaboration with the Kansas Barn Alliance. They have as their principal mission the preservation of significant barns all across the state, and they've had for some time a small grant program of their own where they have provided a small match to a property owner for the purpose of surveying a barn to get a professional analysis of what work needs to be done in order to keep the barn from deteriorating further and to be able to preserve it. Jan, at our request, attended the Barn Alliance's annual meeting this year, and engaged the Alliance in a discussion about their interest or willingness to participate in a collaboration focused on Douglas County, where the HCC would try to devote some of the funds available to it as an additional match, with the objective of getting a significant number of barns in the county surveyed this way. And the Barn Alliance was very enthusiastic about this. The result is that the HCC was able to get SHPO to authorize the use of SHPO money that was already available to the county to use as an additional match for some of these survey projects. The HCC sent out a solicitation to all of the people who had properties identified among these 200 barns, and has received 6 requests to participate in this matching program. The upshot is that over the next year, as these Douglas County barns are surveyed, it will roughly double the number of barns surveyed across the state under this Kansas Barn Alliance program over the last couple of years. So they're devoting all of their interest this year in their collaboration with Douglas County on this program, and it's going to result in a significant expansion of the capability of that organization, and will begin to help the local property owners to address the needs that they have to preserve their barns. A second initiative that the HCC has explored is the possibility of reserving a small portion of the funds that are allocated by the county every year to provide assistance to individuals seeking to have their properties listed on the national or state register, not as a part of the annual grant program, but along as they get to the point where they're contemplating actually filing an application. That program is not underway, but it's something we've been talking about and think would be a useful, a good use for a modest portion of what the county dedicates to the program. Move to the next slide, please. As Jan and Kathy mentioned earlier, that the county has obtained CLG status for the HCC, and one of the things that one of the programs that the State Historic Preservation Office encourages local certified governments to implement is a local registry for buildings that might, for one reason or another, not be appropriate for listing on the National Register or the State Register. One of the projects that Shelley Hickman Clark devoted a great deal of time to during the period that when she was on the HCC was the drafting of a local listing program for Douglas County, and we hope that we'll be in a position to launch a local listing over the next couple of years. In addition, the HCC plans to continue to encourage listings to the National and State Registry by offering workshops. We've done so in the past on the availability of the Kansas and federal tax credit programs to people whose properties are listed. So that all of those initiatives to some extent deal with the historic properties, the part of the HCC's portfolio, but the HCC is very mindful of the fact that the HCC is charged with ensuring the conservation of natural resources as well as cultural and historic resources. And we've begun to explore undertaking a broader scope of surveys, not limited to historic buildings, by developing a set of criteria perhaps for listing to a county register that would include natural and cultural features such as heritage farmsteads or trails or byways or viewscapes or forests or scenic points along the Kaw River, those sorts of things. Those are projects that we think are important, and they're particularly a matter of concern and importance to the stakeholders in what we do that come from the natural resource community, if you will, or the resource preservation community. But they are not programs for which survey funds would be available, for example, from the State Historic Preservation Office. If kinds of surveys and come up with a program for listing those kinds of significant features of the county's landscape, that's something that we'll have to do to plan for ourselves and come up with on our own. And of course, the county, the HCC intends to continue to maintain all of its CLG responsibilities, submitting updates to the KHRI database, reviewing National Register opportunities, continuing the historic survey plan or updating it as necessary, submitting grant applications to SHPO for federal funds for historic resources. And importantly, one of the objectives of doing all of the survey work was to provide the baseline information that would go into a historic preservation plan. Now, obviously, before the HCC undertakes much of the ambitious agenda that we've been discussing, the HCC would expect to seek the Commission's approval and to have carefully evaluated and received approval for any resources that that might be necessary to support that kind of a program. So let's move to the last slide. And that really brings us to the final slide. There are two parts of the slide. I want to spend a couple of minutes talking about the first one. Our thinking about what the HCC's role should be going forward and our brainstorming about ways to fulfill the mission that has been assigned to the HCC by the governing body was already underway when the city-county planning process went into high gear. And aspects of the plan that's come out of that process, of Plan 2040, certainly contemplate that a broad range of important details regarding planning for things like historic preservation, open space use, natural resource conservation, sustainability, and other issues that sort of fall under the general rubric of conserving natural and cultural resources in the HCC's charter. The 2040 plan apparently assumes that sub-plans, if you will help to flesh out the details necessary to accomplish those things. And we, for its part, the HCC had been contemplating asking or seeking a SHPO grant to fund for assistance in funding a historic preservation plan once all of the historic surveys had been completed. The potential to incorporate such a historic preservation plan, perhaps with the federal assistance, the SHPO funding assistance that would go along with that, into a larger, more comprehensive planning process, such as the open space plan that the county intends to develop, we believe would ensure that both the natural and cultural preservation responsibilities of the HCC will be fully addressed. And so from that perspective, the HCC is asking that the program's available reserve funds, those are the funds that were appropriated for earlier grants or whatnot, but were not used on completed grants, be directed to support a planning effort that would meet this long range, the need for long range planning in these areas, to plan for both natural and cultural resources in conjunction with the Sustainability Office. With that in mind, and in the hopes that the County Commission will conclude that that's a worthy use for at least a portion of those funds, we think to be as comprehensive and valuable as possible, the planning process should involve the HCC's collaboration with the Sustainability Office to research and evaluate the best practices of how to develop a historic preservation plan that fits within a county-wide plan addressing these other important issues of natural resource preservation, open space preservation, and those sorts of things. We suspect that there are other places out there that have done similar broad scale planning, but we're not aware of any in the immediate area. And we think one of the things that the planning process ought to incorporate is trying to learn what the best practice is in that regard. The second is to involve all of the heritage stakeholders, local preservation groups, historical societies and museums, natural resource advocates, heritage and agro-tourism advocates, agriculturalists, and the folks that represent farmers' interests, the Douglas County Cemetery Districts, the Public Works Department. Get all of those people or representatives of all of those stakeholders involved in the planning process. In addition, obviously, to the kind of public participation that the HCC has incorporated into its survey work. We think the plan ought to consider all the county resources that are currently devoted to historic preservation and to open space issues, whether or not they're currently part of the HCC's portfolio. As an example, this hasn't crystallized into any sort of a formal proposal, but if you look back at that map that was on slide 14, I think, you could easily identify a county road trail, if you will, past a dozen or so of those historic barns, and it might very well be that you know, that in the future, having designated some of those farms as heritage farmsteads, if the property owners were interested in that and interested in being on such a listing, it might be accompanied by distinctive signage for the properties, but also signage for the Southwest Douglas County Heritage Farm Trail or something like that. And getting all of the folks involved in the planning process that might be in a position to brainstorm those kind of ideas, in our judgment, would be an important part of that. And then we think part of the planning process ought to take a look at whether some sort of dedicated funding stream is desirable and feasible to support the open space and historic preservation plan that the county will come up with. And then lastly, we think the planning process ought to explore the future role of the HCC as a coordinating body with respect to accomplishment of the key objectives that are going to be established in the plan. As you can see from the array of skills of the folks that are members of the HCC now, there are representatives from a variety of natural resource advocacy groups, historic preservation groups, and one of the results of the planning process might suggest that an expansion of the HCC membership to include representatives from some additional stakeholders would be an appropriate result of the plan. In any event, that's our recommendation with respect to collaborating, participating in the open space planning program. And one of the suggestions that we have is that we perhaps call it something other than open space to emphasize the broad scope of the interests that are going to be incorporated in the plan. And then the last thing, the last piece of this slide is while the planning process is going on over the next however long that's going to take, the HCC continues to be, committed to administering the grant program and to supervising the completion of the outstanding surveys and whatnot. And to that end, the HCC has submitted a request to restore the 2021 budget to the 2018 level, which would be an increase of $15,000 from the level that we have been granted during the current year. Part of that, in any event, that's our other recommendation. That's all I have on this last slide.
I think Amy, this is Jan. I think Amy has some closing comment.
Sure, this is Amy. And just to kind of pull together a few of the things we talked about, the recent events with COVID-19 and stay-at-home orders for Kansas have transformed the economic outlook for 2021. It is now in this current condition that the HCC will rise up and continue efforts of leadership and guidance in protecting natural and cultural heritage. Place is important, and Douglas County is a place inclusive of many wonderful resources and people. Projects supported by the HCC programs and grants benefit all of Douglas County, whether giving us a restored prairie to walk through, a new educational experience, a historic building to be inspired by, or the wonders of a ride in the country to see beautiful barns and agscapes that provide sustenance to so many. Mental health is strengthened and restored with a connection to community, nature, heritage, and our reflection of belonging to a place.
This is Jan. I think at this point in time, we conclude our presentation and open it up for any questions or comments.
Thanks for the great presentation, all of you. It's great to be reminded of all of the great work that's going on with our Heritage Conservation Council. We just really appreciate that work. Commissioner, do you have questions for the group?
I'll chime in. This is Nancy. I do have one question, and I guess first though I want to just say a very genuine thank you to the HCC for for this presentation, which was really thorough and inspiring, but just for the quiet, constant work that this group does. You know, most of it seems like it's kind of behind the scenes. It's a lot of meetings. It's a lot of interaction with the public, a lot of interaction with the state office, and just building relationships across the board inside Douglas County and beyond. And I'm just really grateful and so impressed with the work that you all are doing. And this council's makeup in particular, I mean, we've had great councils every year. And when I think of some of the original folks, Ken and Shelley and Julia, we've had great councils for years. But this council is really diverse in its skills and just has so much. You've done so much already, and there's so much potential for more. And so that's what I appreciate, is that you're not messing around. You're getting stuff done, and you want to do more. And I appreciate that. I'm very excited about the barn program. I think that's an underappreciated resource in Douglas County. And I love the idea of ultimately creating a trail or a road system that would give a family or give a person a day's worth of activities to see a kind of a story, a theme come through. I think Freedom's Frontier National Heritage Area would be super interested in that, to help with that. I wholeheartedly agree that the HCC needs to play a real role in the open space work, whatever open space is going to be called, whatever that plan ultimately is called. I think that you all are key to that, and have always been envisioned as key, like the core, with staff and lots of citizen involvement, but with the HCC's relationships in the unincorporated areas, that's irreplaceable. and it's absolutely necessary for this, for us to be successful. And so I think it's great that you all are willing to spend some of your unencumbered dollars toward that planning effort. I think that will be a huge help. And I just look forward to the day when we can actually get together and get to work on it. It feels like we kind of had a lot of momentum going, and now we're, just not exactly treading water, but we're definitely, it's hard to start a planning process when the public is basically shut down right now. But I feel like we have a great future with this program. I certainly hope that we can make it through this COVID crisis whole with the HCC, and that we can really keep up the great work. And I guess I would just ask, my question is on the status of the grant program. How have you been doing that grant program during these last weeks where you can't meet in person, you can't meet the applicants in person? Has it all been on Zoom, or how's that going?
This is Jan. Yes, we've had a series of Zoom meetings. We'll have another one tomorrow evening, and we think it will be the last one to evaluate the grants. It has been challenging to do it basically, in an audio way without, people in a room together. So the applicants have been very good about providing feedback where there were questions. So we think we've gotten the, the additional feedback from the applications as we needed moving forward. So we hope to bring recommendations to you for funds on the first Wednesday in May.
Okay. That's what I wanted to know. Thank you. Thank you for working through this weird season. I'm sure that's been a different kind of process, but I'm sure it's still been a good one. So that's all I've got.
This is Jan. I'd just like to respond to that comment, Nancy, is that the applicants are all, in need of support as they also face all the COVID-19 effects. So we felt it was very important to push through it and to do our part to make sure that things were done on a timely basis.
That's great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Jan, I have a quick question. This is Commissioner Kelly. And I see that Jasmine is one of our panelists. Jasmine Moore is one of our panelists as well. And I, like Commissioner Thelman, am supportive of HCC being involved in that open space planning. I'm interested in what conversations you've had with Lawrence Douglas County Planning Department. I mean, they really took the lead on Plan 2040, and with the open space plan that Jasmine, I believe, is working on along with Kim Kreiner. What discussions have you had with those group, if any, about the role HCC can play?
This is Kathy. I could make one comment that as a part of the approval or the final version of 2040 plan, we provided a letter to the Planning Commission noting that we had responsibilities in some of these areas and wanted to be sure that that there was an opportunity to collaborate with, to be a committee representing those interests. So that was 2 years ago approximately, and so we've been working since that time to try to and engage with the zoning department in particular in some of the recent changes in the zoning. But Jan, of course, has more information, but just a little bit there.
Well, this is Jan. As you know, Patrick, Jasmine and I'm in the sustainability office basically now, except we're not in our offices, we're working from home. But Jasmine may want to respond to that at this time.
So one of the things that came out of Plan 2040, this is Jasmine Moore, Sustainability Director, was the call for an open space type of plan, as well as a climate adaptation plan. And so we've had some initial conversations with the planning department about how we can help move that forward. And so they were excited that that was something that was going to be a pretty immediate action out of 2040, is that these two plans are moving forward. So one of the things that was really early on in the open space planning development, which you all kind of approved last May, almost a year ago, to allow us to even start on this journey. And so we were working on raising funds and doing lots of research about what that could look like. And so it was planned for this summer to start to get together a staff team, an internal staff team, to coordinate on these efforts. And so the planning department would definitely be a part of that process. And then we could define specifically the role of the planning commission. If we look back to our food system plan that was adopted by both the county and the city, that wasn't a plan that went through the planning commission, but it was something that was incorporated into Plan 2040 by reference. And so we have an example of a planning process where it was kind of external to the planning department and planning commission that has now been integrated into the larger planning process. And so I think there's still room for conversation about exactly how we define that relationship, but we're still in the beginning stages. So I'll leave it there.
Thanks. It's just great to hear that you're talking to each other. And I'm sure if the HCCC is bringing money, that may, who knows, that may be make it easier to talk. And that's any other questions from commissioners or comments? Okay. Oh.
Hey, Patrick, I have one other, I think Jasmine alluded to this a little bit, but along with the HCC dollars, we're hoping, we did raise $25,000 and submitted an application to the, what was it, the Funders Network. And I don't know where that process is now, if they're slowed down because of this or what, but if we were to get that grant, then we would have $50,000 to add then to whatever the HCC tally would be. And so we begin to get enough money to at the beginning of a good process that really is intentional about reaching out to the whole community, especially folks who might not necessarily always participate, and reach out to the marginalized folks and all of that. So we weren't quite able to raise as much money as I had hoped. It was kind of a tough go, but if 25 can turn into 50, that'll really help.
Great.
And commissioners, this is Sarah Plinsky. I guess I would just add, just as a reminder, since no official action can be taken at this meeting, that if it is the desire of HCC to reallocate some of their unspent funds, we would need to place that back on an agenda. Also because it's budget, it's related to budget laws in terms of where those funds are placed in our fund structure. So it would need to come back before the commission, and the commissioners would need to affirm that purpose and direction.
Thank you, Sarah. This is Jan. I appreciate that.
Also, if I know the suggestion is that the council might like to add 2 more members, and I don't know that there's really much there to discuss, but I don't, we need to figure out if that's the direction we want to go, because if it is, then before we get deeply into the planning process, it might be good to have the full 9-member council, or at least be working toward that. So I would guess that might be something we need to add to the agenda at some point, or talk about some more.
Yeah, we would need to amend the bylaws and bring it back before the charter for the group, and bring it back before the commission to approve. And then the commissioners would have to then make those appointments.
Okay.
Any other comments? I might just say to your second point on there, Mike, about reinstating it, it's just too early. And obviously we can't make any decisions now, but we hear you. And
Thank you, Patrick.
yeah, we heard you. And
That's all we asked for, right?
It's a meager ask.
and we appreciate it. And we appreciate you recognizing that the unique situation our community is in right now. And that we've said it, I've said it before the meeting, and I'll just keep saying it. We're going to have tough decisions to make come budget time. It's not going to be easy, but I want to send a message to everybody. It's not that we don't appreciate what everyone's doing. And what you all do is really critical to what makes Douglas County a great place to live. So, but it's just too early for us to even consider that, I think, at this point.
This is Jan. I just want to reiterate, thank you so much for allowing us to come today with a work session. We greatly appreciate that opportunity.
Great. Well, thank you to all of you. With that, unless there's anything else, we'll adjourn. We do have a 5:30 business meeting. It's great to see 21. I think I counted 22 attendees, so please come back for our 5:30 business meeting. We do take public comment at our business meetings. I'm dying to have some public comment during our Zoom meetings. So we'll adjourn until 5:30 for our business meeting. Thank you.